Okay, so it's not so unsettling anymore.
No. No.
Okay, so let's get started. So yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, was Daf Samachalaf, I believe. So the last thing that we were learning was the namonos of working with someone who's an Amoritz, because we had earlier on Daf Samachalaf Amar Aleph, we had that a woman is allowed to lend, a woman who's a chaver is allowed to lend kalim to her friend, even though her friend might be using them to process pairs of shvius, and that's b'pnei Dr. Shalom. But she's not actually allowed to work with her friend on her pairs, because those pairs might be pairs shvius, and you're not allowed to avoid it with pairs shvius. However, when it comes to a question of trumas and maasros, according to Abaye, since Roiv Am Ha'aretz Ma'ashenhein, not only are you allowed to lend an Eishes Ha'aretz Kalim, she's even allowed to work with her. Since it's only a Chastra Rabbanon that the pairs are Tevel, you're allowed to work with her. That was Abaye's approach to understanding the Mishnah. Rav's approach to understanding this Mishnah is that there was no Chash at all of Tevel. The question was a question of Tumah. And it was Tumah of the Rabbanon, meaning it was the Hakpada of eating Chulin b'Tahira. So therefore, the way Rav understood the Mishnah is Eishes Chaver who's makbid on eating Chulin b'Tahira is allowed to lend her kalim, and she's even allowed to work with her friend who's an Eishes Ha'aretz, even though it's possible that the Eishes Ha'aretz would not keep Chulin b'Tahira, and that's because it's only under Rabbanan D'Kachumra to be makbid on Chulin b'Tahira. The Mishnah also discussed Machzikini de Nachrim, which we're going to discuss later today. So what the Gemara was discussing on the base was whether or not you could trust a friend, whether you could trust an Eishes Ha'aretz when it comes to switching. In other words, if I give an Ha'aretz Paris, let's say he's a miller, and I want him to grind my Paris for me, can I give him Paris and assume that he's going to give me back the same Paris? The Gemara said, yes, you could. The Gemara said you could always assume that when you give Paris to anybody, whether it's to watch, even if they're an Ha'aretz, or if you give it to them to process, like they're grinders, you can assume you're getting the right thing back. You cannot assume that it'll stay tahar. So therefore, the Gemara made a distinction. If you give them pairs that had not yet been huchshir lakabel tuma, then you don't need to worry about them becoming tomei. But if you give them pairs that were already huchshir lakabel tuma, then when they come back, you have to assume that they're tomei. But you could still assume that they're the same pairs that you gave. And the Gemara challenged that from a couple of different perspectives. The Gemara challenged that from a shviger who does swap and provides good dough, and if some of the dough that her son-in-law gave her was somewhat spoiled, she'll swap with better stuff. And the same thing was with the pundikus, a bacher who's sitting and eating by someone's, who's living by someone's house, because in the yeshivas in those days they didn't have dormitories, and he gave his isa to a pundikus, to a woman who would bake it for him. That woman would also take, if the dough that the boy gave him went bad, she would cut that dough up and add her own dough to it. So therefore, in those cases, you do have to be concerned shemachalefes. Now, I didn't touch it properly yesterday. I touched it v'amar barbe rav lechel chamima v'ana echel karira. I touched it v'loshen bitmiya, and I touched that chamima is bad and karira is good, but it's exactly the opposite. It's not v'loshen bitmiya. It's v'amar barbe rav lechel chamima. Let the Talmud eat good stuff, and I'll eat cold. But I want him to have fresh stuff. Therefore, the pundikus is so machshav of the learning of this bacher that she's going to give from her own fresh dough to replace the older dough that he gave her to bake. Then the Gemara asked the kasha from an Eishes Chaver that's Teichenes, a Eishes Ha'aretz. And we said, does Manshi Tamea, she could, because we know she won't mistakenly put something into her mouth. The problem with her mistakenly putting something into her mouth, I thought it was gzela, which maybe it is. In fact, if you go through Toshes, there is gzela, but Toshes also says there's also a problem. There's also a problem of davar she'eina me'usar. She might slide into her mouth something that wasn't me'usar, because when she's eating with an amoret, she has to assume that their produce might not have been musukan. But when she's tar, we don't want her to work with the Eishas amoret, because when she's tar, she might pop something into her mouth. Once again, the Gemara said that when someone's working with another person, there's a greater chashash that they put something into their mouth. This raya was a little different. This raya was from the fact, if an Eishas amoret will take food from her husband and give it to her friend, that's a little bit stealing. And therefore, if she would steal, the Gemara suggests if an amoret would steal, why wouldn't they also swap though? So the Gemara answered, they wouldn't steal. This is because his friends are working with her. Tosfos didn't like this shot at all of Rashi in this Gemara, because Tosfos tells us that everyone knows the halacha is a woman is allowed to serve someone food if they come into her house. A husband's not makpid on a small bit of food that she's serving. So because of that, Tosfos has a whole different shot in this Gemara, but we have to go weiter. So we are on the third line of Daf Samach Beis Amud Aleph. Thank you very much for playing. Hey, Rabbi Yosy ben Hamashulam, Mishum Rabbi Yochanan Achav. Rabbi Yosy ben Hamashulam said Edus in the name of Rabbi Yochanan Achav, She'omar Mishum Rabbi Lazar ben Chasma. And this is what he said. Ein oisin chalas ama oretz b'tahira, aval oisin isas chulav b'tahira. And Rashi explains that if an amoritz gives you a dough, now if he gave you a dough, that means it was mixed with water, which means it was already hochshul kabel tuma, which means it's already tame, because the amoritz touched it after it was hochshul kabel tuma. So if the guy gives you, not the guy, if the amoritz gives you what you consider isa tmeya, you're not allowed to separate challah for it and give that to the kohen on behalf of the goy. I'm sorry, I keep on saying goy, on behalf of the amoritz, because the kohen will think, a Talmid Chacham is the one who gave me this isa, it must be challah tahira, I must be allowed to eat it. When really it's tummy. And that would be a problem, because you're being meichel to a kohen kodesh challah that's really tummy. But aval oisin isas chulav b'tahira. But what if the amoritz gave the Talmid Chacham, the chaver, flour before it was hochshul kabel tuma? So now, when the Talmid Chacham is preparing the dough, it is kulay b'tahira. Therefore, if he did that, then v'noitel himeno kedei challah, then the chaver could separate from that isa the amount required for challah. Once again, what will he do with it? It has to be delivered to the kohen before it becomes tamei, and if he gives it back to the amoritz, it will become tamei, because the amoritz will touch it and be metamid. So what he will do is umanicha bekafisha oy bantucha oy banchusa, which Rashi says are kelim shel beloy chamasos. They're jugs that were worn out, which means they're not makabel tuma anymore, and therefore, since they can't really be used for anything, you put the dough into that, into a keilat not makabel tuma. Uchashava amoritz litoil, when the amoritz comes to pick up the dough that you prepared for him, noitel ashteyen v'nechush. You can give them both, and you're not worried. Zok Rashi hagebel, the person who made the dough, doesn't have to be concerned. Shemayiga amoritz v'chala b'yitmena. Doesn't have to be concerned that the amoritz will touch the chala b'metamet and then give it to the kohen. And Rashi says, with the kamei mefarish taima, the Gemara is shortly going to share with us the reason. In a parallel case with zaysim, the way they would process zaysim would be dry. They would not be hochshul kabel tova. So what they would do is they would place them in a vat, which would eventually allow the skins to crack, and then the juices would come out of them, and then they're becoming hochshar. At that point, they right away have to be pressed, otherwise they go bad. So the halacha is, trumas zeisov b'tahira. What happens if the amoritz give the Talmid Chacham olives that were already pierced, olives that are already in the stage where they're oozing the juices ready to be pressed. And the Talmud Chacham is a presser, not an oppressor, just a plain presser, right? And he's going to be processing the zaysim that are already tamei, because once they're oozing, they're already huchshul l'kabel tuma, and therefore we consider them tamei kadam or touch them. He's not allowed to separate the oil to give to the kohen for truma. Once again, the kohen is going to think, since it comes from a chaver, it's tahar, and he can use it when in fact he just has to burn it. Aval oisin zaysim chulav b'tayr. But if he's given the olives before they're huchshul l'kabel tuma, and the chaver is processing them from the start, then in fact he could separate the truma properly. But once again, he has to find a way to give the truma to the amoritz in a keli that will protect it from becoming tamei. So what you do is you ask the chaver takes his own kelim. Instead of putting the oil that's going to be going for truma into the kelim of the amoritz, he puts them into his own keli. When the amoritz comes to pick it up, he can take both in the choshesh. Now the obvious question is, if they're in kalim and the amoritz touches the kalim become tamei, which will then go and be metam of the oil. So how will that work? So the Gemara is going to explain. But I'm sorry. Yeah, and then the amoritz who owns everything will give it to the kohen because it's really his. So Zok Gemara v'taimamai. Really, we're not comfortable with the chaver getting involved here with the tamei problems of the amoritz. But the problem is, this guy is a dough kneader. He's very needy, right? If someone needs dough, it means he's very needy. Or if someone is a presser, he needs the money. He has to run a business. So in order to allow him to at least have some revenue, we allow him to service these customers. Does anybody have an art scroll? How is the word badad pronounced? Because badad means alone. But we're talking about the person who's in the business of pressing. I'm not sure if it's badad or if it's badad. It's how you refer to a person who's in the business of pressing oil.
The vadar? Is that what you mean?
No, what is badad? Kedei chayav is livelihood. Badad is the
oil press.
No, I know he's an olive presser, but what is the Hebrew word? Badad with a kamet or badad with a patach?
Vadad.
Badad, so two kamets. Okay. Badad. Oh, it's badad. Okay. Because badad means alone. Badad is a bad guy. A badad is someone we'll call him an oppressor. As an oil presser, we'll call him an oppressor. Sure. Yes. Correct. Sure. And we'll say at a Heksher, I had it done all the work was done by the Talmud Chacham. I guess I'll show us receipt or something. So we have really two identical cases, oil and dough. Why did the Gemara have to repeat it? If we only had the case of the person who needs dough, gobble, okay. If gobble, okay. If we only had the needy guy, mishum delay nafish agri, because he doesn't make so much. There's not a high price commanded for someone who's so needy, and therefore, we that's why we let him do it. Abel badad, but an oppressor, the nafish agri, there's a huge fee to do that process. Emaloi, maybe we wouldn't allow him to do it. But if we only knew that the oppressor is allowed to do his work, yes, there's a lot of money charged for it, but it's a seasonal job. It's done once a year. But all year long, he does not produce it. So we got to make sure that he gets his contracts in. He's got to cut the hay when the hay's growing. Every day people need to make bread. Everybody's needy. Emaloi. So that's why the Gemara told us this halacha both by a gabol and a badad. I'm sorry? Oh, vadad. Okay, thank you. A vadad and a gabol. I am asking, I want to pronounce the word properly. Zok tahela Gemara weiter. So the article doesn't need to know. Okay. Zakt Gemara Amar Mar. Noitel haimena kedechala umanicha bechpisha oiban chusa. Right, that's what we do with the dough. Uchashaba amar tlitoil noitel ashtem veinachoshes. Correct, Gemara. Why aren't you choshes? Why aren't you choshes that the amart will be mitam with the dough? Just because you gave it to him in this keli? Maybe the amart will touch the dough. So you give it to him in a keli, in a broken keli, but he can still touch the dough. This is a fascinating line. The chaver will tell the amoritz, Chazi, look here. Inagas ba, if you're going to touch this dough, hadra lativla. My hafrasha shroom is bottle, and the whole thing goes back to being tevel. Now the amoritz is not going to be able to eat any of the produce, any of the dough. So Vibalt, you're warning him because Amoritz doesn't want to eat tevel either. So therefore, you're scaring the Amoritz not to touch it because it'll become tevel. The question is, he like? Does it in fact become tevel? Just because he made dough tame, that's going to undo the afrashas truma that the chaver did from before. So there are those who learn that it was just a threat, but there are those who learn that no, it's not a threat. Chazal make a takana that when this is occurring, we're allowing the gabel to do this work. They put a tanai into it that his afrashas truma is really only bishlichus, right? You cannot be mafresh truma on behalf of somebody else. It's bishlichus. So Chazal are mevatel the shlichus if it turns out later that the Amoritz touches it and makes it tamei. That's a big chiddush. It's a big chiddush as well because the Gemara doesn't say that that's the halacha. The Gemara just says that the chaver warns Amoritz, don't touch it or else it'll be tevel. The Gemara doesn't give us the background. The background is the chiddush. That there's a chiddush that they make a special, that the Rabbanim made a special t'nai that they're mevatel the shlichus, and therefore the truma is not truma if later on the Amoritz touches it. It's a very big chiddush. In fact, Gemara, v'leichas dilma lo'ichus. Maybe the Amoritz will make a tumah anyway. Who cares? Maybe he doesn't care to eat tevel. So, how could you say that? He brought it to the chaver to prepare for him. If he didn't care, he wouldn't have brought it to the chaver in the first place. Okay, so that takes care of how we deal with the dough. Now let's analyze how we deal with the oil. What he does is when he gives it back to the Amoritz, he gives it in the kelim of the chaver. Why not? Once again, we need to be concerned that the Amoritz will touch it. In the case of the dough, where you're giving the dough back to the Amoritz in broken kelim, so it's clear that something's unusual here that will remind him, create awareness, so that the Amoritz will touch it. But there's no distinction between kelim of a chaver and kelim of an Amoritz. So it's very easy that it could be mistakenly touched. So warning him not to touch it doesn't prevent mistakes. Dr. Gemara, the teretz is, he doesn't just put it into a regular keli, he puts it into a tumah-proof keli. What's a tumah-proof keli? The monachle bichlei glolim, bichlei avonim, bichlei adama. You put it into kelim that are not makabel tumah, like kelim that are made out of dung, made out of stone, or made out of earth, they're not matamim. And therefore there's no problem. I guess not. My area, well, if it becomes tummy, it'll be a lot worse. Ihachi, my area, the chaver, I feel damar nami. If you're putting into tummy proof kalim, so why did the chaver have to put it into his own kalim? Let him ask the Amoritz to provide him with those kalim, and he can put those into the kalim of the Amoritz if they're not makabel tum anyway. So that's exactly what the Gemara means. The kalim shalam Amoritz haru'uyin li'ishtamish ben chaver. When it says he put them into the kalim of the chaver, it doesn't mean his own kalim. It means the kalim of the Amoritz that the chaver could have used. Why? Because there's no chashash on these kalim, because these kalim cannot become tam. Beautiful. Zok helig Gemara weiter. Machzikin yidei akum b'shviyas. So I remember when we looked at Mishnah Chaim asked, what does it mean you can help the guy on shviyas? So what it means is you can literally help them do work on the field, on shviyas. Correct, Gemara, how could you possibly do that? Machzikin, are you telling me you can actually help them? The Amar Abdimi bar Sisna, Mishmei Derav, Ein Oidrim Ima Akim B'Shviyas. You're not allowed to do avoida with a guy on Shemitah. Oidrim means chayfin. You're not allowed to dig. I guess you're digging in the property to do some type of improvement.
Oh.
You're not allowed to do that.
Not to hoe.
Oh, okay. What does that mean? Does that mean like plowing?
Like hoe a row. Yeah, so you can put seeds
Like a
in.
plow. Okay. The Ein Koiflin Shalom Levit Kachavim. And you're not allowed to tell Shalom Aleichem to a guy twice. Why would you say twice? So Rashi Ein Koiflin, the other noise in Shalom Levit Kachavim, the Nedaka Shalom who the Shalom. It says in our Mishnah you're allowed to give Shalom, you're allowed to say Shalom Aleichem to a guy. But Mushudaka Shalom, the Chad is in the Sagi. And we're soon going to learn that the minig was when someone greets you, they'll say Shalom Aleichem. When you responded, you would actually say Shalom Aleichem twice back to them. So you're not allowed to say it twice, you're only allowed to say it once. So how could you say in our Mishnah Machzikin, you're allowed to help the guy do avoida in the field on Shvius? We have a brayso that says Ein Oidrin. Remember lahu achzuka ba'alma. You're not allowed to help them. The brayso says you're not allowed to be oidu with akam and shvius. But if you're passing by a field and you see the workers working, you can give them a thumbs up. Say, good work, guys. Great job, you're doing good. Keep up the good work. That's what you're allowed to say. So achzuka merely means verbal encouragement. Yod Rabbi Yehuda Amalahu, he said achzuku. Good for you guys, you're doing a good job. Absheshes Amalu Ashrasa. What does that mean? There are different words of encouragement. I'm sorry? Asharta? So you're allowed to tell them different words of encouragement that Avada, you're not allowed to work with them. What does it mean? Shalom Leibit Kechavim. Rav Chisda maktim v'yoyev l'hu shalma. Rav Chisda would dafka tell them Shalom Aleichem first because he didn't want to respond. If they would say to him first, he would have to say it twice. But Rav Kahana Amalei Shalom Lemar. Rav Kahana, what he would do is he would say Shalom Lemar, meaning, good morning, sir. He never meant, they thought he meant them, but he didn't mean them. He meant Ela Liboy Halal Rabbi. He meant the Rebbeinu Shalom Lamar. So they thought he was talking to him. So Toisvis, with its purity and its erlichkeit, asked, how is it possible? I'm sorry? Or maybe he meant his own Rebbe. Frank Toisvis, how could someone do that? Pierce Bekundris, Loyhoyim Eschaven Lebarchoy Ela Liboy Halal Rabbi. Vitzorachin. Shaloy Yehebo Zeh Goyim Das Abriyos. How do you tell a guy Shalom Lamar and you cheat him? You're going to his das. That's how Erlich Toysus is. The Achin and Pirshkin, and I don't know where Rashi had to say that. The Leika Amar Ela Ein Kaivin Lo Shalom. The only reason why he said Shalom Lamar because he wanted to go first. Why did he want to go first? Because the normal response was responding with 2 times Shalom. So you don't have to say that he meant to say something else. Even if he meant Shalom, what he was trying to do was avoid saying Shalom twice. Yeah. Shmuel Kamenetsky always was makdim shalom to everybody. Baruch Hashem, Shmuel came home from the hospital yesterday, and he's much better. And I remember he once came to Jackson's Point because we were going to take him on this boat. Now, Shmuel is not comfortable on the water, and but he used to go in Philadelphia. There was a very big fear who had this big, massive yacht who would take him. So I don't know what he expected from our little boat. So we took him to the boat. When he got to the boat, he says, "Nit das hab ich gemeint." So he said, "Temme, ich can gain, ich can gain," because he didn't want to go in a regular boat. But I remember in the marina, normally people are fully dressed in the marina. So we're taking them in the marina through the backside into the boat, and everything's going good. And all of a sudden, a woman starts walking towards us, who's like Adam Arishin Koydem Achet, like Chava Koydem Achet. And I wanted to dig a hole and jump into it because I was so embarrassed about what we were encountering. And Shmuel comes up to her, looks her straight in the eyes, and says, "Good day." It turns out she was an Israeli, and she started asking Shmuel a whole shaila. If I would have had a cell phone camera, oh, that would have been a good picture to put in the Hamadiyah. To Shiva answering the Shaila of somebody asking the Shaila. Okay, Dr. Gemara. Now for sure I can never go on Kol Ocean. Okay. Yeah. Who does Mariba Loimid? Right. Okay, we have to go. Rav Huna, Rav Chisda have a Yosy. Rav Huna and Chisda were sitting down. Chalafa Ozel Gediva. Geniva is a famous character. We know Gediva. Gediva was a big Talmid Chacham who used to fight with Talmid Chacham. Rashi reminds us that on Daf Zayin, the Gemara says that he used to fight with Mar Zutra. Amalei Chad Lechavri. So this is the same story. The Rishonim, this is not a repeat of the story. This is the same story that happened back then, but the Gemara is relating the same story again. Amalei Chad Lechavri. Rav Huna and Rav Chisda told each other, Nekumi Kamei, so we'd stand up in his honor, the Bar Uryanu, because he's a big Talmid Chacham. Amar Loi, so the friend answered back, Umi Kamek Palgon Nekum. We should stand up for somebody who fights with the Chachamim. At the Hachi, in the meantime, Geneva got close. Also, you Gabayu. Amalahu. Now, if you remember last time, the story goes that he asked, "What are you learning?" And they told him, "We're learning about what was it? Richas. We're learning about Richas, right?" And we said they didn't lie. They discussed in Kol Sharuach Chachamim, Kol Sharuach Habrias Noichem and Ruach Chacham Noichem. But here he said, Amalahu Shalom Aleichu Malki. Shalom Aleichem Malki. He greeted them with great honor. Shalom Aleichem King. Shalom Aleichem Kings. Amalei, they told him back, Minolach, they're above in Ikru Malachim. You're calling us kings. How do you know we're considered kings? Amalu, it's very simple. Be. The Torah is talking. Be through me, through the Torah. Malachim Yamloichu. So you see, people who are koine Torah are considered Malachim. Okay, so Amalei, fine. So that's why you called us a melech once, but why twice? Minolach the kafinon Shalom Lamalchi. How do you know you say twice? Amalud, Amar Biyuda, Amarab, Minayin Shekoiflin Shalom Lamelech, Shenema Veruach Lobshas Amosai, Rois HaShalishim. And if we continue on in the pasuk, it says, what did Amosai say? L'cha David Vimcha Ben Yishai, Shalom, Shalom L'cha, Shalom L'Ezrecha. So he also used the double lashon. Amr Lei. So they asked him, Lite Marmidi, maybe we can offer you something to eat. Amalahu, he said, no, I won't be able to eat now. Hachi Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amarab, Oster Loila Adam Sheyitem Klum. It's also to eat anything at Sheyitin Machal Behemta until my behemoth eats. I guess they weren't like Rivka who said, we're going to feed your behemoth and we'll feed you. Bad enough, we're going to feed you. We're not feeding your behemoth. Shenemar v'nesati Esav v'sadachal v'amtecha. V'hadar, after your behemoth eats, then v'achalta v'savata. So therefore, I cannot take you up on your invitation to join you for lunch. Baruch Hashem, we were zeicha to finish the 5th parak of Gittin. B'lineder hadun Allah hanazakin, hadun Allah hanazakin, hadun Allah hanazakin. Now we're going to go back to our regular scheduled programming called Gittin. So when we left off, we were talking a little bit about shlichusin. So now we're going to continue on with shlichus leilacha, shlichus kabbalah, and how these work. So we're back to Lomdus and more of mechanics. Someone wanted to make a person into a shliach lekabbalah. In other words, I'm going to give you this get, and you're going to be mekabel on behalf of my wife. Or he said, I want you to become a shliach lahalacha. So the halacha is, if the person takes the get and he's going to deliver it to the wife, up until the point where the wife has the get in her hands, imratz alachzor yachzor, the husband can be chayzer because the get isn't complete until the woman gets the get in her hands, receives the get in her hands. Because he cannot make a shliach lekabbalah, only she can make a shliach lekabbalah. So she's the makabel. Therefore, the Mishnah continues: if the woman who is able to appoint a shliach lekabbalah, if she says it's kabbaligiti, then imratz alachzor lo yachzor. Then he cannot be chayzer anymore once he gives it to the shliach, because she is like her sender. So So what if the Baal told the Shliach LeKabbalah, you know something? I don't care that my wife made you into a Shliach LeKabbalah. I don't want you to be a Shliach LeKabbalah, and I'm not giving you the get as a Shliach LeKabbalah. I'm now hijacking you, and I'm making you into a Shliach Leilacha. So then, because this Shliach no longer functions as a Shliach LeKabbalah, because the husband is allowed to set the terms of how he wants to give that get. Rab Shimon ben Gamliel ligiti, even if the woman says toilet ligiti, get my get for me, again the husband can't be chayzer because I guess toilet ligiti, the Gemara will explain. I guess I didn't see that yet. Is also a lotion of creating a shliach l'kabbalah. Amalei Rab Acha bar Redi Rab Avi Rab Ashi. Taima the loy shavisi I shliach l'kabbalah. What's the whole reason why? When someone says hoylach getzel ishti, right? It says hoylach getzel ishti imrata lachsa yachsa. Why is it? It is because she never appointed the shliach as a shliach l'kabbalah. So Zok Rashi hoylach getzel ishti koy de gatanim asis in yachsar umari bidaloi shavise I shliach l'kabbalah. So this person is not a shliach l'kabbalah. Ubal lavar shliach l'kabbalah who of the Baal has no power to create a shliach l'kabbalah. The hachayfula. Clearly, it's a chay for a woman to receive a get. So therefore, no one can appoint a shliach l'kabbalah on behalf of the woman. So Nochma, the reason why it's yachzor when he said hoylach get ishti is because she didn't make him into a shliach l'kabbalah. Ha shavisi shliach l'kabbalah. What happens if the woman made a shliach l'kabbalah, and when the husband gives the get over to the shliach l'kabbalah, he says hoylach get ishti? The halacha would be rata lachser lo yachser. He wouldn't be able to be chayzer. And the dik is for the Mishnah. The only reason why hoylach get ishti and rata lachser yachser is because she didn't make a shliach l'kabbalah. Had she made a shliach l'kabbalah, hoylach get ishti would be a lotion of you can be koinit for her. Shemami na hoylach keschidami. It must be that the word hoylach get ishti by itself means you can be koinit right now on behalf of the woman who you're representing. So you have a raya from here. In fact, a hoylach is keschi, and this shaila is relevant even in nezikin, even in kinyonim. Zak gemara loy. You don't have a raya from our Mishnah that hoylach is keschi. La'olam eimalach, la'olam eimalach, hoylach lav keschi. Could be if she made a shliach l'kabbalah, and I tell the shliach l'kabbalah hoylach gets al ishti, maybe in fact I could be chayzer. But why didn't the Mishnah say then you could be chayzer? And you could be chayzer. This kabel get lishti, it's trichelay. Because if you look at the Mishnah, there's two cases. If someone says kabel gets lishti, or hoylach gets lishti, imrot lachso yachso. So hoylach gets lishti, we'll say he could be chayzer even if he's giving it to a shlich l'kabbalah. But if he said a kabel gets lishti, there, if you gave it to a shlich l'kabbalah, only there can he not be chayzer. That's what the Gemara wants to argue. The hiskabel get ishti, it's trichelei. The whole reason why the Gemara made the distinction of yesh shlich l'kabbalah, not shlich l'kabbalah, was in the case of he said hiskabel get ishti. The solkadai chamina. Why is it that I need a chiddush that by hiskabel get ishti? If only if she made a shlich l'kabbalah will it work, but not if she didn't make a shlich l'kabbalah. The solkadai chamina hoilu bal lav bar shavi shlich l'kabbalahu. You might think that since the Baal does not have the koyach to make a shliach l'kabbalah, therefore, af al gab the mata gita liyoda loy lahav gita, even though eventually she gets the get, it shouldn't be a get because she should have skabel gets a lish. Right? The halacha is if he wants to be chayzer, he can be chayzer. But if he's not chayzer, we'll say that when she eventually delivers the get, it will be a good get. Chaim touched upon it. He said it's gabel. How is this gabel a lashon of shliach halacha? Kamash lon the gabel b'halach kama. When a man says to a person, "The gabel gets el ishti," even though he cannot make a shliach l'kabbalah, we'll say that's also good enough as a term to appoint a shliach halacha. Tanan we learn. A woman said it's gabel ligiti, so that's a proper shliach l'kabbalah. In Rotzalasa lo yachzer. That's the second case of our Mishnah, when the woman appointed a shliach lekabbalah. Once the shliach lekabbalah receives the get, the deal is irrevocable. My love, loishna kabbalah, loishna halacha. Let's say that the second case of the Mishnah is referencing both cases of the Reisha. Whether or not the case was that he said it's gabel gets alishti, or whether or not he said hoylech gets alishti. Now, if it's in the case where he said hoylech gets alishti, once again it's a raya that a hoylech is chidami. When he gave the shliach lekabbalah the get and said hoylech gets alishti, he's allowing the shliach lekabbalah to be koined right now. The second case of the Mishnah that says that if she was appointing a shliach lekabbalah, that the get was chal right away, the Baal can be chayzer, that's only if the lashon that the husband used when he gave the get to the shliach was a skabel getzer. But if he said hoylech getzer, hoylech is lav kischui. Tashma, let's try the next case of the Mishnah. If the Baal spoke directly to this shliach and told the shliach, I don't want you to be a shliach lekabbalah. I want you to give it to her. Only there could it be chayzer. Because he protested and he said, if he didn't protest and he just said hoylech gets alishti, it's a mashma imrata lasa lo yachzer. Shemamina hoylech chestidami. So once again you have hoylech keschi. Because the only reason why we said in our mission that it wasn't keschi is because he specifically said efshi. If I didn't say efshi, I just used the generic words hoylech, it means I'm willing to give it to the shliach lekabbalah to be koined. Zok Gemara dilma behelech. Maybe that case is only relevant if he didn't say hoylech. If he said helach. Helach means take it the way you want to take it. Take it the way she wanted it to go, meaning through a shliach lekabbalah. But the word hoylech, that could be different. This is a little bit difficult, this tear to the Gemara, because Rashi says beferish that it's not changing the girsa in our Mishnah. Our Mishnah does say the word hoylech. I'm sorry, it's Tosfos who says Eine Magia. We're not changing the words of the Mishnah. Maybe there's some other Mishnah that uses the word halach here, and therefore don't bring a raya from this Mishnah. It's a little bit difficult to understand because our Mishnah does say halach, but that's what Tosfos says. That's right. So now that means what he wills.
But the last case is she made a
Kabbalah, correct.
So but every time that he says.
Well, the discussion that we're having in Gemara is specifically in a case where a shliach lekabbalah came and you said hoylech to a shliach lekabbalah. Do I want a shliach lekabbalah to work or not? Because so I'll discuss it with you later. I want to finish the daf. We'll go back to this. Zakmar pshita ish have a shliach leilacha. It's pashut that if you want to be memana shliach leilacha, it's pashut that you could be memana a male to be a shliach leilacha. You know why? Because that's the male's job. Shekin baal moilech get leishtay. That's the norm. The husband delivers a get to his wife. It's also pashut that the isha have a shliach lekabbalah, and the isha could be a shliach lekabbalah because once again she's representing a woman. Shekin isha mekabbalah skita miyad baila. The question is ish lekabbalah the isha leilacha. Could you be memana? Can a woman be memana a man to be a shliach lekabbalah, and could a man be memana a woman to be a shliach leilacha? My what's halacha? Zok to Gemara. Let's try our Mishnah. Ha'omer hiskabel get zel ishti, oy hoylech get zel ishti, imrotza lachsor yachsor. But ha'isha she'amra hiskabel ligiti imrotza lachsor lo yachsor. My love b'chat shliach. Pashtus, we're talking about the same person. It's the same person that either the husband said hiskabel or the husband said hoylech or the woman said hiskabel. So if it's talking about one person, at least one of these two, either the male or the female, could be both. Ushmamina. Kosher lekabbalah, kosher leilacha. You at least have one person who is both kosher lekabbalah and kosher leilacha, because let's assume the Mishnah, both in the Reish and Sefer, are speaking about the same person that's being appointed. Dr. Mar, what's the raya? Maybe the Reish is speaking where the husband's being memana a man, and the Sefer is speaking where the wife was memana a woman. Tashema will bring you a different raya. Lefichach, from later on in the Mishnah. Im Omer lo yabal, if the Baal told the shliach lekabbalah, I don't want you to be a shliach lekabbalah. Rather, I want to turn you around, hijack you, and make you into a shliach leilocha, imratza lachser yachser. Here, it's the same person. The same person that she sent to him to be makabel to get. He now wants to transform into a shliach leilocha, and it works. Kosher lekabala, kosher leilocha. So you have a clear raya that kosher lekabala, kosher leilocha. Zok Gemara pshat mina. Maybe we don't know if this person was a woman or a man, right? So can you bring a raya that both a woman and a man can do both? Lavdavka. Maybe we could learn from here a man could be a shliach l'kabbalah. Why? Because if I have a choice of saying a woman could be a shliach l'locha or a man could be a shliach l'kabbalah, it's more reasonable to suggest that a man could be a shliach l'kabbalah, because you find sometimes he does play that role. We know that there are rare occasions when someone marries off his daughter who's a Tana, and now the husband wants to give her a get. Who's Makabel to get? The husband, the father himself. So you see sometimes a male plays that role of a Makabel. Maybe that's why a male can be a Shlich L'Kabbalah. But Ish Leilocha Tiboilach. We still need to know, can a woman be a Shlich Leilocha? My. Amar Mori Tashma. Let's suggest a raya. Afanoshim. We learned the Mishnah. Afanoshim she'ena manish leimer meis baila. Even a woman who's not believed to say meis baila. Remember, these are women that hate her sister-in-law, and could be her future sister-in-law, her husband's brother's wife, her mother-in-law. All of these women who are looking to mess her up, they're nemenis to bring her get. All those cases are a woman bringing a get to another woman. That's clearly shliach l'locha. So you seem to have a Mefursha Mishnah that says that a woman can, in fact, be a shliach l'locha. Amar Bashi, you don't need to go so far to this Mishnah. From our own Mishnah, you could bring a raya. Amar Bashi, miseifa nama shamet mina. They could tell you seifa. I'm sorry, from the seifa of that Mishnah. I'm sorry. Ha'isha atzmo mavias gita. A woman can bring her own get. A woman can act as her own shliach l'locha. Ubilbat shricha loimer b'fani nechtam b'fani nechtam. And we started out speaking with the husband, gave her the get, and said, I want you to be the shliach halacha, and I don't want the get to be, now that I gave it to you, go back to your city, go back to your bezdin, and there you'll accept it. Shemamina, that a woman, in fact, can be a shliach halacha. Gewaltig. Itmar. Haveli giti. What happens if a woman tells a shliach, bring me my get? Now we know it could be male or female, because we know even a male could be a shliach l'kabbalah. Bring me my get. Now the shliach goes to the husband, and tells the husband, so he lied. She didn't say, I want you to be a shliach l'kabbalah. She just said, I want you to bring me my get. It's a shliach l'ivah, which means the get won't be chal until it reaches my hand. This shliach went and told the husband, she made me into a shliach l'kabbalah. V'hu amar, heilach kamash amar. And the husband, when he gave the get to the shliach, he says, take it the way she said. So the question is, what do I mean when I say that? Do I mean take it the way you told me, she said, and I'm giving it to you as a shliach l'kabbalah, and therefore it's not going to be a good get because you're not a shliach l'kabbalah? Or when I say take it the way she said, is I don't trust the word you're saying. I'm giving it to you under what she told you, whether or not you said it correctly or not. I don't care. And then it would be a good get. So Amar Nachman, Amar Rabbi Baravu, Amar Rab, afilu get liyada, even if the get reaches her hand, ain't a mugureshes. The woman won't be mugureshes. So you see, Shema Mina Adibura Didekasam. It's clear that when the husband gave the get over to the shliach, he gave it over to the shliach under the understanding that when the shliach said, I'm a shliach l'kabbalah, that's what it is. So I wasn't memana the shliach as a shliach l'locha. I'm giving it to you thinking that you're the shliach l'kabbalah. But in fact, you were not. So you had no mandate even to bring the get back, and because of that, it's not a good get. If you were relying on whatever the woman said, then it should at least be a good get when it gets back to her house, because she made him a shlich leva. So you have a raya from here, in fact, that whose opinion am I following? I'm following the shliach. I'm trusting the shliach that that's what his mandate is, and therefore I'm giving it to him under that pretense, and therefore it's not going to be a good get at all. Amar Ravashi, Dr. Ravashi, hachi hashta. You don't have a good raya. If I pass him that it was a good get, then you have a raya with clarity what I hold. If I say it's not a good get, that's just a chumrah. If we would have told us for Karen that it's gabaligiti v'ishtecha amra habaligiti, And Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba Babaru, Amar Rav would have said that Kivin Shigi get Liyadoi Migureshes, meaning Alma Dibur Didahu Kisamach. Even though he said I'm a shliach l'halacha, but in fact she was really a shliach l'kabbalah. If the halacha would be that when I give it to him, when I give it to the shliach, the woman is instantly megureshes, that would prove without a doubt that I'm relying on what the woman said, and I'm giving it as a shliach l'kabbalah, even though this fellow says that I'm a shliach l'halacha. Inami, or liyada, or if the psak would have been that when she gets it, she's megureshes, adibur didei kasamach. We'll say that the husband is giving the shliach to get based on what the shliach says. There's a shliach le'lacha. Elahacha over here, it has nothing to do with the fact that it's adibura didaka samach. It's mishum the akre shliach lishlichusi legamri. Who? It's because the shliach was akre shlichus. Because the shliach was supposed to be a shliach lahalacha. Because the woman said, "Bring me my get." He didn't want to schlep back. He was too lazy to schlep back. To amar shlich lekabbalah havina. I'm asking to be a shlich lekabbalah, except to get where the husband is and not to schlep it back to you. But I don't want to be shlich halacha. So maybe this has nothing to do. Our case has nothing to do with whether or not I'm listening to the woman or listening to the man. It's all about the shliach rejected the shlichus. So of course it won't work. Okay, we'll stop here and we'll be mamshach with this shayla tomorrow. When the shliach misrepresents his shlichus and the husband gives the get to the shliach, is he relying on how the shliach misrepresented himself, or is he relying on whatever the woman said and he's disregarding what the shliach actually said? Okay, we'll stop here, Bez Hashem, and we'll be mamshach tomorrow.